¿Qué tal? Ojalá todos estén bien. It's a new week, a new opportunity to create, and a new day to have Conchas y Café. So, those of you that have turned in your work using Google Classroom, thank you. I've tried to already begin giving people feedback on their writing. Ustedes que me han enviado su trabajo por medio de email usando Google Docs, también muchas gracias. Eso me ayudará a también darles mis notas sobre su trabajo. And for anyone else that hasn't done so yet, remember through Google Classroom, you have the opportunity to upload assignments, and I can then give you feedback on your writing with the hopes that we'll still have another Conchas y Café Zine, hopefully by the end of April, to begin putting together all of the work and also figure out some sort of release party or something like that. Depending on how things continue to go with our current coronavirus outbreaks. But overall, I mean, this has been a pretty good opportunity for me to see how this might work long-term for Distill Arts and our Conchas y Café workshops. I think that moving forward, the Google Classroom will be a very useful tool for me to continue to have our lessons archived in some way. So thank you guys for helping me pilot this new version of Conchas y Café. So let's get into our lesson for this week. Esta semana la cita que les presento viene de Julio Cortázar, quien fue un escritor argentino que nació en el año 1914, el 26 de agosto, y falleció el 12 de febrero en el año 1984. Julio Cortázar is an Argentinian writer who was born 26th of August in 1914 and passed away on the 12th of February in 1984. He was a pretty influential writer for his time period, primarily publishing during the time of like his contemporaries of Pablo Neruda, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, all sorts of people, Octavio Paz, and just like many of them, he was a writer that wrote not just poetry but also short stories, and he also happened to live in Paris, France, where some of the subject matter of what we'll be talking about today kind of had its little like birth period, you could call it. But the quote comes specifically from Julio Cortázar's novel called Hopscotch. En español, el libro se llama Riachuela, y fue publicado en el año 63 o 64, si me acuerdo bien. So this novel in particular is set in Paris in the 60s. And Julio Cortázar's main character is quoted as saying, "I realized that searching was my symbol, the emblem of those who go out at night with nothing in mind, the motives of a destroyer of compasses." Y en español dice, me había dado cuenta de que buscar era mi signo, emblema de los que salen de noche sin propósito fijo, razón de los matadores de brújulas. Particularly like that quote. I think that it kind of speaks a little bit to the idea that we're always searching for something, that we're trying to ultimately find meaning in the things that we do and the things that we read and the things that we create, especially as writers. We're always searching for some kind of symbol, and that search itself is a symbol, according to the quote. And I think that the search for meaning in things can sometimes be frustrating, sure. It's not like we can always come to a set meaning for anything. The emblem of those who go out at night with nothing in mind. I think that particular part is interesting because, at least I know I've done that before. I've gone out driving, cruising the streets in my hometown here in LA, just sort of to get lost, um, to find meaning in being lost, which is possible, I guess. It's not like we have to always do things with a specific purpose in mind, and it's not like we always have to have some sort of concrete destination that we're reaching for. And I guess part of the human journey is that, right? It's that we're not always able to find a set meaning for anything. Sometimes for us as individuals, it's just simply about being content with what we have, with who we are, and with the things that we're able to I don't know, somehow accomplish in our life. And this week, in thinking about the lesson, I was really thinking a lot about, what is the purpose of writing? What is the purpose of art and the icons that we create, the symbols that we create, and how do those things somehow get passed on, or how do they grow and change? Kind of like what we were talking about last week with the whole thing about memetics and memetics, where certain ideas get passed on, and there's different vehicles by which they're passed on. Culture being one of those things that we will always pass on. And there's definitely something to be said about the symbols that we adopt when we're trying to pass on ideas and images and cultural practices. There's symbols that can be like stand-ins for those things that we do, like La Virgen de Guadalupe being a symbol for being Mexican, La Virgen de Guadalupe being a symbol for, in a lot of cases, a mother, or for God, right? So symbols can be very, very important in our life as writers. So let's think about that. Part of what has come out of this idea of breaking down symbols and understanding symbols was not necessarily something that was always had a name. It was something that throughout literary and art history, I'm sure people called it a lot of different things, but when we start to think about language itself, right? Language is a construction of symbols. It's a construction of little things that we call letters that are really made out of just lines that are made in a particular direction or whatever. And those things, they have a meaning to them because that's what we place on them. We place that particular meaning on them, and it's not always a set meaning. Kind of like searching in the night for what the moon might give you in terms of inspiration. It's not necessarily that that itself has a whole ulterior meaning. And so the subject that I wanted to share with you all today is something called semiotics. La semiótica fue como filosofía, una filosofía que se fundó por Ferdinand de Saussure, que fue un lingüista suizo, y él dio la definición de la semiótica como la vida de signos dentro de la sociedad. And when you think about that concept of the life of signs within society, right? Ferdinand de Saussure, the Swiss linguist that founded, or was one of the founders of, semiotics or semiology. He called semiotics, the life of signs within society. And when we consider how we use signs and symbols and icons and all these other different names that we have for visual representations of the things that we assign meaning to, Um, I mean, we in society, we all kind of have to agree that that is a letter, and that collection of letters is a word, and that word means X thing. Um, Kind of like how I was saying about, the idea behind La Virgen de Guadalupe. As a society, La Virgen de Guadalupe in Mexican society has a very, very important place in society. It's the symbol of the Mother of Christ, but it's not just that either. It's also a symbol of indigenous culture. It's a symbol of Tonantzin. It's a symbol of how the way in which the Spanish actually absorbed ultimately the original people's culture into a larger culture and created something new. So, the life of signs within society, this idea or the study of signs and sign using behavior, semiotics is very, very much a part of how we can deconstruct language and how we can deconstruct art and all visual representations of things. To give you kind of a quick basics on what Saussure actually basically came up with in the idea of semiotics and the concept of semiotics, he treated language as a sign system. So, el lenguaje es un sistema de signos que tiene dos partes claves. La primera es el signo, el señalador, cual en el lenguaje es la colección de sonidos vocales o marcas en una página. The sign, which is the first major component of semiotics, is the signifier, which in language is a set of speech sounds or marks on a page. We all have the ability to vocalize, unless if you have some sort of, damage to your vocal cords or something like that. And our ability to vocalize and to create vowels and consonant sounds, those are the things that, when linked together, create a word. That's how you're able to understand me. And, the word that we, for example, call word, we have assigned that a meaning. And so when you write it out, W-O-R-D, that sign, right? That collection of letters, that scrawling of little lines on a page, those are the things that we have assigned a meaning to, right? Then there's the signified. So the signified is the concept or idea behind the sign. El señalado es el concepto o la idea tras el signo. Es lo que al último estamos llamando lo que le llamamos, ¿verdad? Como dije hace rato, la palabra, P-A-L-A-B-R-A, palabra, es una colección de letras que forman una palabra. Y esa palabra le hemos designado la idea de una palabra. Por eso se entiende así, se entiende como tal. Un vaso o un jarrito de café, por ejemplo, esto le llamamos un jarro. This is a mug. And as a mug, we have assigned it that name. So the sign is mug, and this is the signified, right? This object. Entonces, cuando estamos hablando de literatura y en particular de poesía, la idea de la semiótica como modo interdisciplinario para la examinación de símbolos, el signo, en diferentes campos surgió durante los fines del siglo XIX e inicios del siglo XX, con el trabajo independiente de Saussure y del filósofo norteamericano Charles Sanders Peirce. And to, sort of repeat that in English, the idea of semiotics as an interdisciplinary mode for examining symbols, the sign, in different fields emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with the independent work of Saussure and of American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce. So these ideas of the signifier and the signified, or the sign and the signified, those are ideas that no one had used before in art and in poetry. And when we're talking about poetry, it's really important that we think of it as almost like how we build metaphors. Everything has a secondary meaning. Language is not fixed. Language can say one thing but mean something else for you internally. That's what we call the connotations, right, of a word. The annotation is the sign. The annotation is the word mug, right? M-U-G. Now, if the mug itself were in fact not a mug, but instead I call this a mug, my Apple Pencil here, if I call it mug and I'm telling you this is a mug, then you have to, in a lot of ways, go with what I'm saying. But a mug can also, represent something else besides just the mug. It can be, the idea of warmth. It could be the idea of comfort. It could be the idea of coffee. It can be all sorts of different things that in writing we use the collection of words, the words that we actually link together in juxtaposition of one another. That's how we can then imbue meaning to something, even though the sign is maybe not what we're actually talking about. In visual art, there's other ways to understand semiotics, and in the way that we actually communicate with our symbols, visual symbols, that can also be sometimes flipped on its head. But to understand that, we also need to understand a little bit more about what Peirce added to the idea of semiotics. So one of Peirce's major contributions was the categorization of signs into three main types. The first is an icon, which resembles its referent. So think of like a road sign that tells you, curvy road, right? You have that little yellow road sign with the black arrow that's curved, or as the handout says, a road sign for falling rocks. You have a little car, the symbol of a car with rocks falling over it. Then the second is the index, which is associated with its referent, as smoke is a sign of fire. Para estas contribuciones de Peirce, cuando él empezó a trabajar dentro de la semiología, esas ideas del icono y del índice fueron ideas que nunca se habían usado para hablar de los símbolos que creamos como artistas. El icono tiene semejanza con su referente, como señal automotriz para la caída de piedras, o simplemente un señal que se ve hay que decir, de que es 8 lados y que está marcado en rojo y dice stop o alto, ¿verdad? Simplemente si tuviera esa figura de 8 lados y de color rojo, se sabe que eso indica un alto, ¿verdad? Uno no tiene que poder tener la capacidad de leer el inglés para poder saber que eso significa un alto. Ahora, el índice es muy similar a eso, ¿verdad? Es esa idea de que es un símbolo que es asociado con su referente, como dice aquí, como el humo que indica fuego. Cuando vemos el humo, sabemos, hay un fuego, o algo se está quemando. So that idea of a sign or an index being something that alludes to the actual thing that's happening, that's really important, especially in poetry. That's what we call allusions, right? We're inferring something that is actually not there. Then finally, Peirce's third categorization is the symbol, which is related to its referent only by convention. Now, this right here is what really matters to writers. Think of words or traffic signals, right? We look at a traffic signal. Green means go. Yellow means slow down and prepare to stop. Red means stop. El símbolo viene siendo como las palabras o un semáforo. Y esa relación que tiene el símbolo con su referente es solo por convención. Eso significa que es solo porque todos en la sociedad estamos de acuerdo de que eso es un símbolo para lo que queremos que represente, ¿verdad? Como ese mismo señal de 8 lados y color rojo. Eso todos estamos de acuerdo que significa un alto, right? The stop sign, even though it says stop, in English, if we were to see it without that, we wouldn't understand that that symbol is a sign for stop. And that's something that can easily be changed if you were to change the words that are on the sign. And that's what Peirce's conclusion was. Peirce demonstrated that a sign can never have a definite meaning, for the meaning must be continuously qualified. That means that we always have to agree that that symbol or that sign is what we are assigning it to represent. Aquí en el folleto les presento una obra de arte que fue creado por René Magritte, que fue un artista surrealista belga, y él es muy reconocido por esta pieza que dice "Ceci n'est pas un pipe", que traducido del francés a español dice "esto no es una pipa". This René Magritte print or work of art that's on the handout, that's a really good example of how semiotics was ultimately influencing the way that people think of imagery and the way that people think of symbols, right? You see here a painting, a very well done painting of a pipe, right? Of a smoking pipe. And underneath it tells you directly, this is not a pipe. And so that little dissonance that's created, right? It's telling you to not look at that as an object that is a pipe. It's telling you to look at it as a not pipe, as a non-pipe. And so right there, that's a perfect example of how a sign can never have a definite meaning, of how, as an artist, you're able to actually really mess with the idea of what words mean. And ultimately, that's how language has evolved. Desde los primeros tiempos, en cuando nosotros los humanos empezamos a hablar y formar una lengua, un lenguaje, como que siempre hubo esa realización de que nunca se podía decir definitivamente todo lo que pensamos, todo lo que sentimos. Por eso existen palabras en ciertos idiomas que no se pueden traducir. There's, I don't remember the actual number, but in language, for example, for the Inuit people, there's hundreds of ways to talk about snow. But in English, there's just one word, snow. And so that evolution of language is something that, has ultimately been affected by this idea of semiotics, right? The words that we assign to mean something can always change and can always have a different way of manifesting in our work, especially for us as writers, as poets. And language can evolve greatly from the time of the cave paintings to even now. We're kind of back to using icons and symbols. The emojis that we use when we're texting, they're meant to signify something, whether that be the actual feeling that the emoji is trying to represent, or it could be, like an ironic use of that emoji. to mean something else because it's inferring other things. So, this week, the poem that I'm presenting to you all is a poem that, again, I created, I wrote to continue on with the little tradition that we started with this current series of Conchas y Café. And it's a poem that's basically dedicated to language and words. I call it Sopa de Letras. Vocales vocalizan en mi boca ahumada un verbo en erupción, ya, no en el coágulo de bombas acerbas, las burbujas de baba petrificada entre las grietas de mi garganta, en aquel hogar de pistas indicando a ancianos y obras trascendentales, queriendo reírse de ti, me dejan, con sabor a palabras chupadas y acabadas, me dejas, el vacío de lenguas prehistóricas y poesías grabadas por debajo de mi lengua bifurcada, me dejas, sin silencio, sofocando por las ventanas de mis entrañas cerradas sin ningún aire que pase a contarme de lo que perdí. Queda la ceniza de Babel y un ligero olor cuneiforme. Queda el avance de glifos indicando mi nahual, grabado entre ADN y queda 2 lenguas extrañas buscando la conquista de tú y mi interior, una barriga llena de sopa de letras y unas ganas de vomitar mucho más para saber por fin cuál de los lenguajes de verdad platica dentro de mí. And I actually translated this one for everyone. So this one, in English, I call alphabet soup. Vowels vocalize an erupting verb in my smoky mouth, no longer. In the clot of acerbic bubbles, the bubbles of petrified spit among the trenches of my throat, in that home of clues indicating ancients and transcendental works. Wanting to laugh at you, they leave me, with the taste of tired and dried out words. You leave me, with the vacuum of prehistoric tongues and poetry transcribed on the bottom of my bifurcated tongue. You leave me, without silence, suffocating, because of the closed windows of my entrails and no air that passes to tell me what I missed. The ash of Babel and the light smell of cuneiform remains. The advancement of glyphs indicating my Nahual written among DNA remains. And 2 strange tongues remain, looking to conquer you and my interior, a belly full of alphabet soup and the need to throw up much more to finally know which language truly speaks inside of me. So I hope y'all enjoy the poem, enjoy the lesson. My challenge for you this week in writing your poems for the week is to really think about the evolution of language and how maybe words mean different things for you, right? Every word that we say, that we pass on from one generation to the next, and those little meanings that we give them, sometimes they're historical, sometimes they're allusions to other ideas or other concepts. It's part of that human journey. It's part of the way that we have learned to evolve and communicate in our evolution. I think that it's very possible that the things that we say and do in our poetry can mean something completely different for someone else, maybe 100 years from now. Right? Poetry written right now during the time of our 2020 pandemic, as it'll probably be known in the future, in 100 years from now. It might have a different kind of meaning to people because they'll be using different kinds of words, perhaps. So, saludos otra vez a todos. Su tarea esta semana es de escribir un poema que básicamente analice su uso de palabras, su uso de los símbolos que intentan usar, ya sea como parte de su identidad o no. So have fun writing your poem. Have fun breaking down the semiology of your images that form, I guess, a part of your identity. And I'm looking forward to seeing your assignments as you turn them in. So hasta luego, stay safe, and we'll hopefully see each other soon.